Dear friends and peacemakers, good evening to all of you. Our guest speaker today is truly one of India's most prolific human rights advocate, a distinguished lawyer who combines legal acumen with a heartfelt humanism, exemplified so well through a series of public interest litigation cases he fought, covering a very wide expanse of meaningful indulgence, a journey of commitment, integrity, and dedication to the common good that touches and sensitively pursues a wide range of subjects from human rights to environmental protection and accountability of public servants and state actions. One who has tasted a bit of IIT Madras and Princeton University, but settled for the love of law at Allahabad University. His commitment to public cause has taken him to work with various organizations like the Center for Public Interest Litigation, People's Union for Civil Liberties, Transparency International, and committees campaigning for judicial accountability. And interestingly also, a very excitingly sought yet very impactful stint with the Aam Aadmi Party. He has been, dear friends, an ardent supporter of human rights and human cause, as I said earlier, and especially fought for the rights of the vulnerable and the marginalized, including the tribal displacees, and has thrown his intellectual might to defend various agitations, including the Narmada Andolan. To him, state must accommodate voices and concerns of the people, including those who might have taken to more radical resistance. An advocate for banning the death penalty, he stands today, dear friends, a strong voice for inclusion and accommodation of dissenting voices. On everybody's behalf, I am most delighted to welcome Mr. Prashant Bhushan, who shall be delivering today the commemoration lecture on the topic Challenges to Democracy and Human Rights in Contemporary India. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Prashant Bhushan. Sir.
Thank you very much, Professor Paramjot Singh, for this very effusive introduction, which I don't entirely deserve. Fathers, brothers, sisters, and friends who are present today to commemorate the first death anniversary of Father Stan Swamy. I am indeed greatly honored to be invited to deliver this keynote address for such a soul as Father Stan Swamy, who embodied absolutely the truest and most pristine spirit of humanity and Christianity that one can imagine. I had the occasion to visit him at his ashram in Ranchi a couple of times, and what I found there was that he had offered his ashram as a haven to all kinds of activists working for human rights, working for the poor and the marginalized, and especially the poor tribals of that region. He was the most generous person that one can imagine. He was the most gentle person that I have come across. Totally gentle and without any trace of ego, etc. I remember the day when this contempt case against me was going on in the Supreme Court. His standing, I saw his video, is standing with the placard saying, "I stand with Prashant Bhushan," with that placard shaking in his hands because of his Parkinson's. Absolutely a remarkable man, one of the most lovely people that I have ever come across. His death is underscores the subject of today's topic, which today's lecture, which is challenges to democracy and human rights in today's India. The manner in which he was arrested, the charge for which he was arrested, the manner in which he was treated in jail, which eventually led to his death in jail, just goes to show how serious and how precarious the situation of human rights and democracy has become in India. What we see today is an assault on free speech. All people who speak against the government or against the Prime Minister or against the Chief Ministers of the state run the risk of being incarcerated, being charged with sedition, being charged under the Unlawful Activities Act, etc. A very large number of our finest human rights activists, whether in the Bhima Koregaon case for which Father Stan Swamy was arrested, or whether it's in the Delhi riots case, or in many other cases, are suffering unjust incarceration by the totally mala fide application of these draconian laws like sedition or UAPA, which in my view are clearly unconstitutional. There is an assault on minorities. The government and the party in power is just busy and focused on promoting hatred against minorities, particularly Muslims, also Christians. The whole idea is to divide and rule, to divide people between Hindus and Muslims, between Hindus and Christians, to somehow get Hindus to hate Muslims, to get them to hate Christians, get them to hate other minorities, and thereby garner the support of the majority community to remain in power. There is also an assault on civility and culture. We have never seen this kind of culture of abuse, vulgar, vile abuses being spoken against activists, against minorities, against even judges who stand up, who occasionally stand up for the minorities or for those who are weak and oppressed, by people who are in the IT cell of the ruling party, which, as Swati Chaturvedi wrote in her book, I Am a Troll, is controlled by no other than the Prime Minister himself. So there is an assault, large-scale assault on civility and culture. Death threats are meted out to people like Rana Ayub or various other people who have the courage to stand up and speak out against the ruling dispensation. There is an assault on every institution which has been created by the Constitution and our laws to protect democracy, to protect human rights, to protect civility, to protect public money. There is an assault on the judiciary, as a result of which, to a very large extent, the independence of the higher judiciary has been compromised. This has happened in a variety of ways. It has happened by the government using all investigative agencies under their control to somehow find any material which can be used to blackmail judges, particularly chief justices, because if the government is able to control the chief justice, it is able to control half the judiciary. This compromising of the independence of the judiciary has also been achieved by the government not allowing the appointment of independent judges who are recommended by the collegium of the Supreme Court. By just sitting on those recommendations and allowing the appointment of only those people which the government perceives to be either saffronized or biased towards the ruling party or not independent enough or compromised. There is an assault on the media. We are seeing a spectacle which has never been seen in India before, that most of the mainstream media, particularly the electronic media, its independence has been compromised and it has been made an instrument of propaganda of the ruling party, particularly this propaganda of hatred, of trying to spread hatred against the minority communities of this country. I mean, we have never seen this kind of spectacle where the vast bulk of the mainstream media, particularly the electronic media, is just engaged in these totally divisive debates in order to divide the people on the basis of their religion and in order to inculcate hatred against the minorities. And this has also been achieved by a variety of ways, by firstly using inducements of government advertisements and government money to compromise the media, and secondly by using those who are still not willing to come or to become an instrument of propaganda of the government. Then agencies like the income tax, CBI, ED, NIA, etc. are used against those media organizations, their owners or their anchors, etc., in order to bring them to heel. Fortunately, during this time, there has been the growth of the internet media and the social media, which the government is also trying to control, but so far they have not succeeded in controlling the bulk of that. There is an assault or a complete capture of all investigative agencies, including the local police authorities, the CBI, the Enforcement Directorate, the National Investigating Agency, the National Narcotics Control Bureau, the Income Tax Department. All investigative agencies have been made into instruments of the political instruments of the government to unleash them and harass their political opponents, harass independent journalists, harass independent activists who speak up against the government. We have never seen this kind of spectacle where there is an absolutely blatant abuse of investigative agencies, such as particularly the Enforcement Directorate and the NIA for political ends by this government. The Election Commission, which was independent for many years, especially after Mr. Seshan became the Election Commissioner. For more than 30 years, the Election Commission remained a beacon of independence and performed its role of independently overseeing elections in this country. But now, for the last several years, we have been seeing that the Election Commission's independence has also been totally compromised, as a result of which the Election Commission has also begun to function as an instrumentality of the government by fixing election dates according to the instructions of and the convenience of the government, by enforcing the model code of conduct only against the opposition and not against the ministers of the ruling party, etc. That's very evident now in the conduct of the Election Commission. The Comptroller and Auditor General, which was also a very independent institution, which was functioning very independently and did proper investigative audits of all major government expenditure or all major government institutions, etc. Their independence has also been compromised. Recently, there was a report saying that after this government came to power, the CAG audits of the central government have reduced by 75%. That means that they are not even auditing most of the accounts or most of the central government institutions which they were auditing earlier. In the Rafale deal audit, the CAG for the first time in its history left out the pricing details in that audit on the instructions of the government, and that became clear when the government informed the Supreme Court before the CAG audit report had come that the audit report has come and the pricing details have been omitted. So obviously the pricing details were omitted at the instructions of the government, which is also a clear indication of how the CAG is functioning as an instrument of the government. Educational institutions like universities, the University Grants Commission, which controls universities, schools, and the NCERT, which controls schools, school education, all of this is now getting saffronized. And in fact, universities are supposed to be places where critical thinking, debates, discussions are supposed to be encouraged. But today we are seeing exactly the opposite of that happening, where debates, discussions, critical thinking is being discouraged. Debates are not being allowed inside university campuses. Various seminars, etc., have been cancelled by university authorities across the country. And some universities like JNU or Jamia or Aligarh Muslim University, there is an unprecedented assault of the government on these universities. That gentleman who was the Vice Chancellor of JNU and single-handedly responsible for destroying JNU to a very large extent, that gentleman has now been made the chairman of the University Grants Commission. NCERT is revising the textbooks for schools, the history textbooks for schools, by omitting large parts of inconvenient history and rewriting history in a saffronized way. Quite apart from all these assault on all these institutions, I could probably name a few more. There is an assault, a whole-scale assault on democracy itself. See, unfortunately, in India, we adopted a model of only representative democracy and did not have much by way of participatory democracy in terms of the participation of the people in lawmaking or policy making, etc. The only place where there was some scope for the people to intervene in lawmaking, etc., was through parliamentary committees, was through what is called pre-legislative consultation in some cases, where legislations which were supposed to be brought in parliament were to be placed on the website in order for the people to critique those or send their comments on those. And thereafter in parliamentary committees, where the parliamentary committees, if laws were referred or proposed laws were referred to the parliamentary committee, then the parliamentary committee used to invite the people at large to come and say whatever they wanted to say about those laws. That was the only instrument of people's participation in the making of laws, etc. After this government has come, after the Modi government has come, we are seeing the spectacle of parliamentary committees virtually being totally omitted from virtually no laws are being referred to parliamentary committees. No laws are being placed, no proposed laws are being placed on the website for people to comment and give their responses to that. So the public participation in the making of laws, etc., which was limited in any case, has become zero, virtually zero after this government came. Parliament has been reduced virtually to a farce where many laws, at least 100 laws have been passed without any discussion in Parliament in just a matter of a few minutes. The bill is placed and thereafter by voice vote and in a lot of chaos, the speaker declares that the bill has been passed or the law has been passed. Parliament sessions have gradually reduced. The time for any effective discussion in Parliament has been gradually reduced, with the result that even Parliament has been rendered almost redundant. Elections, which are supposed to be held once in 5 years, which are virtually the only way for the people, or supposed to be the only way, where the people can express themselves in favor of some political party or another, even those have been reduced to a game of money power. This is because we have a system of first past the post at two levels. One is when we elect our representative, the person who gets the maximum votes gets elected, and even if all the other candidates together have 4 times the number of votes that this person has got, they count for nothing. Thereafter, when the government is formed, the party or the coalition which gets the majority of seats in parliament or in the assembly forms the government, and the opposition counts for nothing in lawmaking, policy making. The result is that when people go to vote, they are voting for a government, and therefore they do not want to waste their vote, and therefore they don't want to vote for a candidate or a party whom they may consider to be the best, but which they feel does not have any chance of winning. So they will then see which are the parties or candidates which have some chance of winning and vote for the least bad among those. Now, how do they perceive which parties or candidates have some chance of winning or not? That perception is made on the basis of the visibility of those candidates and those political parties. And that visibility is largely a function of money, because with money, you can buy advertisements, you can put up hoardings, you can have paid workers who go and distribute your, carry your banners, posters, handbills, etc. You can even organize large rallies by money, by paying money. Today, election rallies are organized by giving contracts to people that you get 10 buses or 20 buses of people and you will be paid so much, etc. So elections have largely been reduced to a game of money power, and today we have a situation where, because of various legislative changes that have been made, the ruling party has more money than all the rest of the political parties put together. One party today, if you look at electoral bonds, which is a non-transparent way of funding political parties, because these are bearer bonds where the name of the donor is not visible and not even the election commission can come to know who has donated. About 10,000 crores has been donated through electoral bonds, which is a new instrument which was created in 2017 or so. Since then, in the last 4-5 years, and more than 2/3 of this money, has gone only to the Bharatiya Janata Party. The foreign contribution, you see, we expected that the role of money power would be reduced in elections by putting limits, and that's what the law was, that there were limits on the election spending of uh, candidates. So no candidate could spend more than 70 lakhs in parliament elections or 25 lakhs in assembly elections, etc. But unfortunately, there is no limit on the spending by political parties, with the result that in the last elections, it was estimated that the BJP alone spent more than, I mean, tens of thousands of crores in the election, which means for each constituency, they were spending more than 20, 30, 40, 50 crores for each candidate or each constituency. They were spending more than 20 times the maximum permissible expenditure for their candidate. And we are seeing that even candidates are spending 10 times or 20 times the limit, and they still don't get caught or disqualified. That's because they spend this money in cash, which cannot be tracked, or the election commission doesn't want it to be tracked. You see, when Mr. Modi brought this law on demonetization, he said that I am bringing it in order to make it a cashless economy. Now, I can understand that you cannot ask ordinary people to spend all their money through banking transactions, and they will need some cash. But you could have certainly made a law saying that at least election candidates and political parties would have to be cashless, which means all their transactions would be through their banks. Then it would have been much more difficult for them to evade the limit on election expenses. Limit should have been put on the spending of political parties. But instead of doing all this, of course, a system of proportional representation should have been brought, which is there in most countries, by which even if a political party gets only 2% vote, 2% of its candidates get elected to parliament, so that people don't feel that if they are voting for a smaller party, they will be wasting their vote. Today, people feel that, therefore, they don't vote for their favorite party if it's a smaller party which they feel is not really in the game of power. So, instead of making those kind of changes to reduce the role of money power in elections, this government brought exactly the opposite changes. There was earlier a law, the Foreign Contribution Regulation Act, which was mainly brought to prevent political parties, candidates, public servants, etc., to receive foreign funds and be influenced by foreign money. Unfortunately, that law is today being used against NGOs, etc., to prevent NGOs from taking foreign funds, etc. But it has been opened up for political parties by saying that subsidiaries of foreign companies can donate money to political parties. So the whole law has been turned on its head, and you are thereby allowing foreign funds to influence political parties also. Then there was a limit about the amount that corporations could donate to political parties. The limit was you can't donate more than 7.5% of your annual profits. That limit has been removed, with the result that corporations can donate any amount of money to political parties. All this has resulted in just accentuating the role of money power. And as I said, the ruling party today controls more than 75% of the funds of all the political funds. That means they have at least three times the money that all the other political parties put together have. And as a result of which, they use this money power to continue to win elections. So we are all in all, we are in a state where our democracy has been eroded to the point of virtually becoming just tokenism. It's just become a token or a ritual of our being able to vote once in 5 years, with effectively no, we do not really have any effective control on which party we can bring to power in elections also. And of course, after elections, the people have virtually no say whatsoever in the making of laws, in making of policies, or in the running of governments. And the government in power is using all its power to control and destroy the independence of all the institutions, control freedom of speech, and is using its power to even erode culture and civility in public discourse. So we are in a very difficult situation. The question is, what can be done? In my view, in this kind of situation where we are facing a full-scale assault, a fascist assault on everything that we value, on not just our freedom of speech or human rights or democracy, but on culture and civility itself, civil society has a very major role to play. And we need to sort of raise our act to be able to play that role. So the first thing is that despite this assault and the threat of being put in jail, the first thing is that we have to continue to speak out and develop that strength and courage to be able to face the prospect of being put in jail, of being arrested or put in jail without really getting too unsettled by that. That's the first thing that all of us in civil society need to do. The second thing is that though they have controlled the media, the mainstream media, they have not yet been able to control the internet media or the social media. And there are a very large number of people in civil society today who are very distressed and alarmed at what is going on in the country, who are very distressed about the kind of falsehoods that are being spread, the hate that is being spread, especially against minorities, etc. And therefore, we need to create what Yogendra Yadav calls a truth army, an army of activists who use the internet and the social media in order to counter the falsehood and the hate that is being spread, in order to counter the abuse and the threats that are being spread, and in order to use the internet media and the social media for propagating the right kind of messages about the contribution of the minorities in our history, in our society, etc., in the independence struggle, to propagate the benefits of human diversity, cultural diversity, religious diversity in our society, how this has helped this multicultural, multiracial, multi-religious society has helped this country become strong. So that's the second thing that we need to do. The third thing is that we need to really come together to again launch a major civil society movement. And I believe that the movement should be on the issue of unemployment. We need to have a very large mass movement in this country to, firstly, for a law about the right to employment. Secondly, to ensure or to pressurize the government to fill up all government vacancies in a credible and time-bound manner. And thirdly, to prevent indiscriminate privatization of public sector institutions like banks, railways, etc., which are necessary, or to privatize healthcare or education, because these are sectors where the poor and the needy need to be helped and need to be subsidized. They cannot function on their own steam. So therefore, we need to run a very large civil society movement to press the government on the right to employment, which means that every citizen between the ages of, let's say, 21 and 50 must either have a job at least at minimum wages, or he must be given unemployment allowance by the government, at least half of those minimum wages. I believe that the time has come and the time is ripe for a major civil society movement on the issue of employment, in which the cutting edge will be of the youth, who are the ones who are most affected by this issue. The youth have to be there at the forefront of any large mass movement in this country, and I feel that the youth are agitated enough, exercised enough to be able to be for us to organize them, for us to energize them for a movement of this kind. And I feel that that kind of movement would really help. Firstly, would firstly hurt the present dispensation, which is largely responsible for bringing about this employment crisis. And secondly, it will also help the opposition parties to bring their act together, to get a narrative in place, and it will have a major effect on political fortunes in the elections to come. So I believe that Father Stan Swamy was doing everything that he could to stand up for justice, to promote justice, to fight against injustice, to help the poor and the marginalized, etc. And I'm sure that if he had been alive, he would have done everything possible in the for civil society in order to ensure that civil society gets its act together to do the things that I have mentioned. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for such a brilliant exposition on such vital issues. We have some questions, and there are many, but we'll try to take few of them. The first one is, why do we silently endure this intrusion and intrusion into the constitution and these unconstitutional acts? Why can't we stand up? This is from Vincent Peripadan. Sir.
No, I think we can stand up and we should stand up. A lot of people get afraid that they might also be targeted, they might also be arrested, they might also be jailed. And I think the time has come for us to lose that fear, because we are at such a dangerous juncture in our social life or in the life of our country, that if we do not stand up today, things are going to be much worse tomorrow. And those people who feel that they can escape the wrath of this government and escape being put in jail, etc., by just remaining silent, they don't realize that very soon the time will come when even those who remain silent will be hit and affected by what is going on. And therefore, the earlier we stand up, the faster we stand up, and the more of us who stand up, the faster that we will be able to deal with this fascist regime and the sort of fascist climate that has been created.
Thank you very much, sir. There's a question from Tony Dias and Dr. Mona Medonka, and they've asked on similar lines, and the question is, given the hatred and the fascist assault on minorities and democracy, what is the role of Christians and their institutions?
So one great thing about Christians is that they run two kinds of institutions in this country, that is educational institutions as well as healthcare institutions. And educational institutions are certainly institutions where students who come through these Christian institutions can be encouraged to question firstly can be sensitized to what is going on in society and should be encouraged to question. The establishment should be encouraged to question the orthodoxies of our times. So that's a very important role that the Christian community institutions can play. But quite apart from that, the Christians like the Sikh, you see, the Sikh community is about as numerous as the Christian community. We have 2% Christians and 2% Sikhs. The Sikhs are one community which have boldly stood up against injustice every time, which have boldly stood up for the poor and the marginalized. And the Christian community has all that possibility and much more, because the Christian community in many ways is quite a privileged community, and therefore it needs to play that role as well, that is, stand up against injustice, stand up for the poor and the marginalized, which is what Father Stan Swamy was doing.
Thank you, sir. So there's a question on horse trading. Despite the anti-defection law, we have seen in recent past that money, as you said, plays a very important role, and MLAs and MPs are bought. So how to confront horse trading in a democratic setup?
You see, every law which has been made, and this anti-defection law was made quite stringent, despite that is being kind of defeated by this process of the defectors forming the government, then changing the speaker, and then the speaker decides whether the defectors are to be disqualified under the Anti-Defection Act. In this, you see, the judiciary needs to play a very good and strong role. And unfortunately, we are seeing that the judiciary has not been able to. You see, earlier they did play this role in the case of Arunachal and one other state, where they held that the manner in which the defectors formed the government was not correct, and they ordered the reversal of that. But today we are seeing that the judiciary is unable to play that kind of role, that robustly independent role, which it played in those years. That was about 6-7 years ago. But in the last 5-6 years, we have seen that the independence of the judiciary has largely collapsed, unfortunately.
Thank you, sir. Sir, there's another question which actually raises a very grave concern, and this is about the failure of constitutional institutions as a result of being politicized. This question comes from Vincent Perepadan. Is civil society effective in such situations? And if it is effective, how to confront this?
Civil society can be effective. I have always adopted the policy of criticizing the judiciary. For example, I'm talking about the judiciary, criticizing the judiciary when they fail to do their constitutional duty and when they do not act independently. And I have always praised them when they in fact do their constitutional duty and stand up independently. So one important role of civil society is to keep a watch on all these institutions, such as Election Commission, CAG, etc., and criticize them when they do not do the right thing, which is expected of them, and praise them when they do the right thing. So this is one thing which civil society can and should do. We need to have a citizen's watch on all these institutions, which I had mentioned.
Thank you very much, sir. We have a question which is relating to your area of specialization, the public interest litigation, and there is a growing concern that the number of PILs in various courts are going down. What are the reasons behind it?
Well, one reason is that people are losing confidence in the judiciary, just like nobody is now going to the National Human Rights Commission because they have lost confidence in the National Human Rights Commission with the appointment of these sort of compromised people in those institutions. Same thing, Lokpal. I mean, the kind of people who were appointed to the Lokpal was so bad, and people didn't have any confidence in the Lokpal, and therefore they stopped going to that. Same thing is happening with the judiciary also. Public interest litigation is coming down because those public interest litigations which were filed, for example, challenging electoral bonds or challenging 370 or challenging the CA, etc., they are still pending. They are not being heard. And even, for example, when the Rafale case was filed about the Rafale deal, the Supreme Court dismissed it by accepting the sealed cover even handed over by the government, which was not even on affidavit, not even signed by anybody. And it contained all kinds of falsehoods. And the Supreme Court just uncritically swallowed those falsehoods without even sharing that sealed cover with the petitioners, etc. So therefore, it's because of the gradual loss of public confidence in the independence of the judiciary that PILs, I mean, there are some setup PILs that are being filed by people like ML Sharma, etc., who file sponsored PILs in order to get them dismissed and so on. But genuine PILs are hardly ever being filed.
Thank you so much, sir. So this brings me to a related questions, and we have many questions, but we will take just two more. Mr. Bhushan has been talking for a very long time. We have to give him some rest. But there are certain questions which are so important that I cannot miss on them. And one is that is access to justice difficult for the poor in India? And if so, what difficulties do you see in the present legal aid system available to poor litigants?
Yes, justice is very difficult for the poor because they cannot afford lawyers. And without lawyers, you cannot access the judicial system. The Parliament had brought a law of Gram Nyayalayas, which were supposed to be informal courts at the sub-tehsil level, at the block level, etc. But unfortunately, those Gram Nyayalayas have not been set up, which could have been accessed without the help of lawyers. The legal aid system is not a proper answer or not a proper remedy because it certainly cannot respond to the amount of or the number of poor people who are in need of legal aid. The legal aid system is not robust enough or not large enough to be able to address all that. It is there as a kind of, it's essentially, in my view, a kind of tokenism. And the real answer was to have simplified the judicial system by bringing in these Gram Nyayalayas, which should have been informal enough to be activated by the poor without having access to lawyers, who could have just been provided some paralegal help, and where the courts could have responded without getting into procedural issues or technical procedural issues.
Thank you so much, sir. So the last one, and I'll club two questions here in this. One is from Father Joe Matthew, who wants to know the status of Father Stan's case as it stands today. But before that, a question: is the presumption of innocentia abandoned by our procedural structures, including the jails, and that also is like not respecting human rights of prisoners or the standard minimum rules. So now we would just request to kindly mute your mic. Kindly mute your mics, please. Yeah.
So I don't know personally about Father Stan Swamy's case as to what is the status of that. But regarding your other question, the presumption of innocence and the people languishing in jails without trial, It's really very, very shocking that today the investigative agencies are arresting people. Like Mohammed Zubair has been arrested even before the FIR was filed, and he's being arrested in new cases while he's in custody, or he's being charged with new cases while he's in custody. You see, the law on arrest was settled by the Supreme Court many years ago, that you are not supposed to arrest a person merely because there is an FIR against him or you are investigating some charge against him. The arrest is only in three circumstances. If he is likely to escape and not be brought to justice if he is not arrested. Second, if he is going to tamper with crucial evidence. And third, if he has committed a heinous offense like murder, etc., and he is likely to repeat those offenses. Now, in most cases of arrest, say Tista Sitalwad's arrest or Mohammed Zubair's arrest or so many people, Siddiq Kappan, etc., in none of these cases, any of these ingredients are present, that they will escape or they will tamper with evidence or they will commit another heinous offense, etc. And therefore, they ought not to be arrested either during investigation or even during trial. But unfortunately, today, what we are seeing is people are being arrested and the courts are not even releasing them on bail and not following the judgments of the Supreme Court regarding that the rule is bail, jail is the exception, which is to be applied only in these three situations. So it's really unfortunate that we are seeing the criminal justice system being turned on its head. And people, it's like Alice in Wonderland, where she said that let the execution take place and the trial will follow. The Queen said, off with his head, let the execution take place and the trial will follow. So this is what is happening in this country. Let this person be put in jail. Father Stan Swamy just remained in jail without being tried, without the charge against him being tested in court, an absurd charge. But yet he was put in jail, kept in jail for so many years. And I mean, he died in jail because of his health condition and the conditions in which he was kept, where he was not even given a sipper and so on. So it's really unfortunate what is happening. It's of course a gross violation of the rights of people.
Thank you very much, sir. Sir, I have one, if you can just, excuse me, a little indulgence. The last question. One from Dr. KV Sumitra. She is from Kochi, Kerala. She is a media person and a writer, and she has a question. Sumitra, yes, you can go ahead and ask.
Yeah. Good evening, sir. I'm Dr. KV Sumitra, a media person and a writer from Kochi, Ernakulam. I just want to know about our constitution, that every woman in our country and children in our country faces so much issues as long as before. So what is the constitution stand for this, and what is your stand in this area of issues? Just want to know what privilege we people receive from this constitution and the democratic world of India. Just want to know, sir, what is your stand?
See, women are supposed to be equal citizens in this country, and it's of course true that in our society women are treated very badly. They are often treated as property of the men, etc. But the law is very clear that women are entitled to exactly the same rights as men, and therefore, but this is a societal problem. It's not a legal problem because the law is very clear on this. And regarding children also, unfortunately, yes, children are also often treated very badly by their parents or their guardians, etc. And their sensitivities or their rights, etc., are not respected. And but that again is a societal problem more than a legal problem. Yes, in India there is some lack of having proper laws to deal with abuse of children. There is a lot of abuse of children going on. Even in schools, we see corporal punishment being meted out to children and so on, even now. And that certainly should not be allowed. There should be more stringent laws against abuse of children. There are laws against child labor, etc. But unfortunately, even those laws are often not being enforced. There are many industries where child labor is still being practiced despite the ban on child labor. But it's largely, I mean, the problem of how women and children are treated is a societal problem. Unfortunately, societal attitudes have to be changed, and we need to work more on that.
Thank you very much, sir. It was a great fortune for each one of us to have come across you, your ideas, so well elaborated and touching on such issues which are of such importance, the contemporary concerns that we are having. And it brings me to a lot of thought. And as I go through your elaborations, I am just asking myself one question, that if we have the supremacy of law, the rule of law, and the promises of the Constitution, the prescriptions of liberties in our statute law, if we don't have institutions, we have all these things on one side, but we don't have institutions which accommodate these, there's no meaning of such democracy. And what then must be our talisman? Where do we have to look? And from your talk, I can just find out my talisman. And my talisman here would be the Constitution. And I would just ask each one of us, and as you said very rightly, that we have to own this process. We have to raise our voice as civil society, and we have to find out whether we are the we in the preamble. Are we the we in the preamble? Are we the we who is the base of all power? So I do not have a clear and a conscience-based answer to it, but legal one, post Keswananda Bharati case, gives me some hope. And that hope was so well exemplified by you, sir. And even with the questions that we come across as challenges, I still have that faith lingering, because you have instilled in us the idea that we have to keep talking. We have seen numerous instances, and you have elaborated them so very well. And we have seen that post 1982, the judiciary has deviated in a way from a very traditional and confined domain of locus standi to accommodate PILs. And that is how the PIL journey started. And you very rightly pointed out that the number of such PILs have gone down, and it gives the reasons for that. And you have also alerted us to being vigilant about guarding the institutions, guarding the Constitution, and also being vigilant about what happens in the social media. Honorable Justice Pardiwala's remarks a few days back is an indicator to that. And you have very rightly pointed that out to us. And I would therefore submit, in consequence to your talk, that we must be vigilant. Apart from raising our voices, we must be vigilant. We must be vigilant if we want our Constitution to work. And there must be a constant audit, as you said, of administrative, legislative, and judicial action. And we must also include ourselves and subject ourselves to this scrutiny. Subject the state and subject ourselves to this scrutiny. For sometimes errors of perceptions may lead us to the wrong way. I remember, sir, going through your talk, that one has to be careful to guard the domain of law. And I remember John Locke when he said in 1690, and it holds so true today, that wherever law ends, tyranny begins. And I must admit, happily so, that in laying out the agenda for the future, by bringing the youth to the center, by inspiring us, and you have done a great job. You have done it fairly well. Yours has been a wonderful journey, a very inspiring one for all of us. And we must endeavor to honor, protect, and promote not only the rule of law, but as you said, sir, to create the truth army. I thank you very much on behalf of everybody present here in the Peace and Reconciliation Mission, the Center for Peace and Justice, XLRI Jamshedpur, that this evening has been very meaningful, and we must take the message forward. We should not rest. And thank you very much for enlightening us on all these issues. Thank you very much, Mr. Prashant.